Welcome to the Nemeth Report podcast. I'm Dr. Tammy Nemeth, energy historian, analyst, consultant, and I'll be your host. Today, I'm really honored to be joined by Brian Crossman, partner at Independent Well Services Company and a frequent contributor to Pipeline Online. Our topic for conversation today is the net zero energy transition in Canada and its effects, its challenges, and opportunities for independent operators in the Canadian energy industry. So, Brian, before we get started, can you just take a moment to introduce yourself to our audience today? What's your background? How did you come to be a partner of the Independent Well Services Company in Saskatchewan?
Well, thanks, Tammy. First, thanks for inviting me to the podcast. I appreciate it, and thank you for all the work you do. Being a good advocate for the energy industry, not just in Canada but around the world. It's
Oh, thank you.
greatly appreciated by all of us out here. And yeah, my name is Brian Crossman. I started in the oil patch in 1985. It was supposed to be just for the summer, and I'm still in it. And I started off working for a well servicing company. Then after about 8 years of that, I went overseas for a little while, did some work in Russia and Siberia on a Calgary overseas project for Better Well, and I came back and then worked for the same company I worked for in Canada before, and Badge Services. They were sold to the Ensign Group, and then after a few years of that, me and a couple of the other guys working there, we decided we would strike out on our own, and we formed Independent Well Servicing, and my current position there is I'm the sales/marketing guy, I guess, and whatever else needs to be done. And it's been a really good run. We started that in 2004, and we're still operating to this day, and keeping guys employed and doing good work for our valuable customers, and having a good, safe work environment for our people to be in, and everyone can earn money and hopefully have a decent work-life balance.
That's awesome. It's so great that you guys got together and formed this company and that you employ a fair number of people, I imagine. And has your company expanded over the years?
We have expanded. We've kind of pulled back a little bit after the last slowdown. It's the biggest challenge is finding people, and so we're focused on providing the top shelf crews and good equipment for our customers. Expansion is great, but currently it's harder to find the people to come work in the industry, and that presents a whole pile of new challenges
Oh,
as
for
well.
sure.
So that's where we're struggling. We don't want to send out a bunch of guys that are going to be, possibly hazardous themselves or our customers, right, or the environment or anything for that matter. So we take pride in having good tight crews. We have a solid management team. Our general manager and field supervisors are excellent, and we work hard at doing a great job for our customers, and that's the goal, is to provide good service with minimal problems. So
Yeah, that sounds sounds impressive and good. So, you've had some very interesting international experiences. You mentioned that you spent some time in Russia. So, how does Canada and Saskatchewan compare with other jurisdictions with respect to safety or the environment or employee relations?
well, like I say, my time in Russia is quite a while ago now, but I still remember it quite vividly. It's definitely a totally different atmosphere over there back then. I was there in the mid '90s, and the environment was terrible as far as how they treated the environment. It's like oil spills were common, saltwater spills very common, and things you wouldn't see in Canada even back then, or even in my whole lifetime, going back to 1985 when I started. Like one example I can give is the one I took. I have a picture of the rig I was operating, Beta 49. And that day I took that picture, there's a big cloud of black smoke in the background. And anywhere I turned at 360 degrees, I could see another cloud of black smoke. And what they were doing was burning off the oil spills from the previous winter when they have flow line leaks. And they would basically get out there in the muskeg and push it all into a pile. Then they would light it on fire and burn it off.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I can't say that they do that way now, but I would hope they've improved their techniques since then on spill recovery, but I can't say for sure. I guess I could do a little research and find out sometime. It might be interesting.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see the evolution of those practices if it's improved. I suspect it's improved over time, especially as more international companies were operating in Russia, trying to help them operate in a better, more environmental, safety conscious way. Um,
You know,
so, you said that your company hasn't you kind of slowed expansion since the last downturn. So, what have the biggest changes you've seen in Canada and in the Saskatchewan patch and energy industries over, say, the past 15 years or so?
well, I think there's been a lot of changes. Like say that's the only constant in the oil patch is and the safety has gotten a lot better since when I started, like I say. But we have, I guess, we have the challenges like the manpower, as I mentioned earlier. In part, I think we're struggling with the media and government, basically, and our education system turning people away from the energy industry. Basically, telling people it's well, you don't want to be in oil and gas. It's a bad industry to be in. It's dirty, and they cause all these problems and global warming and everything else. Which I have my own opinions on that, but and the costs are a lot higher than they used to be. Things like manpower shortages, unrealistic ESG goals, carbon taxes, insurance, equipment costs. These are directly affects the contractors and their abilities to be competitive, safe, and efficient and profitable. The goal is to make profit for our shareholders and keep
Yeah.
the equipment in top condition, and of course provide safe, high-paying jobs with a good work-life balance for the team. And our customers, and rightfully so, they expect, top shelf crews and good equipment and good safety records. And, it's, and these things, they all do cost money, and we do everything we can to keep our costs in line so that we can continue working for these customers. And, all of whom are really great. And for the most part, very understanding about our situation as well. And they try to accommodate us, but, they're trying to make money for their shareholders too. So, we have to find that right balance. And, I think we do a fairly decent job of that for the most part. But yeah, it's been a long string of changes. The equipment has definitely gotten better. We were one of the first companies in this part of the world to have freestanding double triples. That means there's no guy lines on the rigs, and so you don't have to drill pins into the ground. And just you name it, I guess. The safety training is I think each one of our guys has anywhere between 20 and 26 different safety courses under their belts just to go work on the rig every day.
Yeah. So, when your rigs are out there, has there been a shift recently where maybe you're working on other projects besides oil and gas?
Yeah, we've actually been doing some of this other work, like there's potash solution mining has been a big adaptation for the equipment. It's been around for a long time, actually, going back into the 70s at Belle Plaine. We haven't worked on that particular project, but I know guys that have. We've done solution mining work at other potash mines up around Saskatoon and up near Regina, Western Potash. We've been involved with some helium exploration and work, and that's upcoming as well, and that's interesting. Also, lithium brine. We've been doing some work on that, and we got some more upcoming next year. And we were involved with the Deep Earth Energy geothermal project by Torquay as well, and we've done a lot of work there. And there's more of that coming down the pipe too. They're just working on perfecting their processes and exactly how they're going to be proceeding with that. So there's lots of other things too. And we've done work on cavern storage facilities like underneath Saskatchewan. There is all kinds of caverns where we store natural gas, butane, liquid propane, and that for various companies, Transgas being one of them, and Sask Energy. And we've done work repairing, keeping those caverns in good repair as well. And then the other thing is carbon capture is coming down the pipe. It's getting more, prevalent, like Sask Power. And then I know people in Alberta that are doing some groundwork on creating some carbon capture opportunities out there as well. So I think this ties in nicely with drilling and oil well servicing. It's the same equipment. It's the same processes, basically, just for a different reason. So there's definitely some future in a lot of that, I think, for Saskatchewan and Western Canada.
Do you have to train your employees differently depending, like, if you're doing helium or geothermal? Are there different concerns that, is there different kind of training that's required for your employees?
Not really. It's basically, a lot of it's just the tripping pipe in and out of the hole and doing production testing, which sometimes involves swabbing or circulating or clean outs, things like that, which is kind of standard stuff for the oil patch.
Right.
So, we might run into the odd thing a little bit different, especially if you're working with gases and stuff like that. And it's pretty straightforward, really. Like say, we have run into naturally occurring radioactive materials at times, but we've run into that in the oil patch too. So we've taken training for that before as well. So it's nothing really brand new. It's just different work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to hear. At least there isn't a whole lot of extra training and whatnot required for sort of transferring those skills to a different type of resource, which is good to hear. Um, so, what do you see then as a hurdle for a company like yours, if there is this forced transition to these other things? Is that a big hurdle for you guys, or given that you can do the drilling for lithium and helium and geothermal and carbon capture? Um, do you see that will be a challenge for you?
Well, I think the biggest challenge will be the like say, I guess like the perceived lack of upcoming work in the future in the oil patch, and I think that's just not a problem for well servicing or drilling, but that's a problem for the Canadian taxpayer. We do a lot of funding, as you well know, Tammy, for our country through taxes gained, provincially and federally from the energy industry. And this is where the big problem is trying to shut down an industry that basically keeps a lot of Canada employed and in with revenue from oil and gas and taxation on various levels, going right from the ground all the way up to like something built in Ontario or Quebec that we use out here. And and of course the cost of carbon tax and ESG regulation, which you know sometimes I can understand why they're doing it, but sometimes a lot of these ESG rules don't make a lot of sense either. And I think we need to streamline that as well to so that we can be efficient on this. And I think when we do these things, uh, and where we're trying to cut out oil and gas altogether in this country, we do it at our own peril because oil will still be coming out of the ground and we'll still be using it. It's just going to come from other countries.
Yeah, for sure. Although they are trying to, like Canada, which has signed on to various UN initiatives, are trying to throttle demand because they figure if they can stop people from using or demanding oil or natural gas, then they can have a further justification for shutting down the industry. And there's like the IEA report that came out yesterday was all about, oh, we're reaching peak demand, and once they phase out the internal combustion engine and force people out of their cars, then there won't be demand for it. So that's kind of that trajectory. But I don't know if I believe that. If India and China and other developing countries in Africa don't want to use electric vehicles and want to continue using the internal combustion engine, then I don't see how the demand is going to drop that much.
Well, you're absolutely right, Tammy. I think the demand isn't going to drop. And like say, electric cars have their place. And I think they're a great idea. The technology doesn't exist yet to make them so they work in climates like Canada or worldwide for that matter. We still have to charge the batteries. I think it's not so much the electric car itself, but it's the storage of the electricity is where the problem lies. And like I have an ongoing joke with a couple of buddies of mine and say, well, if your electric car runs out of power, you got to get out there with a generator and charge it up or put it on the back of a truck and tow it away. And if your car runs out of gas, well, you just take a pail of gas out there and put the gas in your car and away you go. You can't
Yeah.
take a pail of electricity out and pour it in the electric battery. And like I say, I've always said this. I'm not against electric cars. I just think that we need to focus on getting them perfected before we run blindly into the future. Not, you know, I'm trying to think the right way to say it. Half cocked, I guess. Like we seem like and the same goes for windmills and solar panels. I think we're throwing, vast amounts of money and resources at these projects, and they don't have the same kind of energy density as crude oil does.
Yeah.
Uh,
I know
and you know,
the energy density is such a huge element of it all that just you know when as soon as you mention energy density to a policymaker, their eyes kind of glaze over. It's like, oh my gosh, don't get sciencey, you know.
well, you're exactly right, Tammy. And what they need to understand is like, and I think anything's possible. And I think in the future, we could very well invent a form of energy that's easily storable safely and efficiently. But I think by trying to throw money in all different directions at at the things we just mentioned, solar powers, windmills, and everything, we're throwing a bunch of our future away when we could be, using the revenues we have from oil and gas to fund the projects and do get the physicists and the engineers and scientists on this all on the same page and focusing toward one goal instead of looking toward, you know, just throwing money at every direction, the new thing that comes up. And I think a lot of this, and this is just, me and $1.50 will get you coffee with this opinion, but I think a lot of it's in self-enriching for companies and politicians to throw money at these projects, knowing full well that they're probably not going to work. I think there was an electric bus company in the States just went under
Yeah,
based on their fact that they're just not working.
yeah,
And I think that's what we need to avoid that. And like I say, and I think the free market's the best way to dictate it, but it needs to be a free market, not a government mandated market by handing out subsidies and everything else to these companies so they can build a few buses, a few cars, or a project or a windmill, solar farm. And then 10, 15, or even years later, even 20 months in some cases, everything goes belly up and we've thrown a bunch of money away for nothing, and we can be working harder at being more efficient with our fossil fuels, carbon capture, and things like that. We can continue to use the resources we have for decades, hundreds of years to come, if we do it in the right way. And we've gotten better at keeping pollution at bay over the years, like acid rain. We don't even talk about that anymore.
but that's a really good point that you're making. It's a forced transition. It's not a natural one. What they're, you know, what's being proposed isn't a better alternative. Now, when petroleum, as you know, when petroleum came along, it was better than what was there before. It was better than the horses. It was better than coal running ships and so on. And so it was a better alternative that became ubiquitous. And so now the only reason why policymakers and people in the environmental movement don't want us to use it anymore isn't because there's a better technology out there to replace it. It's because there's been this demonization of carbon dioxide, because they might say greenhouse gas emissions, but the target is really carbon dioxide. So um, as long as it's a forced transition and isn't, as you say, the market that's coming up with a better alternative or has researched some really cool new technology that is more efficient, is better, then this is kind of doomed to failure. And um, we could, as you say, be spending this money on certain adaptations. If the weather is going to get a little bit worse, fossil fuels or hydrocarbons, and having that money to prepare it and recover is is lost if you're spending it or wasting it on all of these different initiatives that if there's scientists and entrepreneurs out there who are more than willing to take advantage of whatever grants and subsidies are out there. And there's all kinds of pitches being made for lots of different things that they know are doomed to failure. But it's a bit of a way to generate some income and revenue, and that's not necessarily to the benefit of the economy.
Well, you're exactly right, Tammy. Like saying you made the point about a natural transition, just like from horses to oil and gas and fossil fuels, and it's 100% true. It's I just when I see the amount of resources we're throwing away at very very short term projects, like I'm sure you've seen the pictures of the windmill blades cut up and buried in the ground
Yeah.
in Utah and Wyoming and Texas, I believe now too, and just like and then solar panels having their 20-year lifespan. I think solar panels are fantastic on top of your camper or out your acreage and things like that. And people have them in their houses in Hawaii because they have so much sun there. But you have solar panels in near Weyburn, Saskatchewan, and we get a fair bit of sun here, but we don't get it year round. We get clouds, we get snow, and we get rain. And I read an article I think you may have posted about solar panels barely being 20% efficient,
Yeah.
and we're throwing millions of dollars at these things, and I just it doesn't make any sense to me, I guess. And I guess maybe it's just the farm boy in me looking at it saying that dog don't hunt,
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, I was listening to Robert Bryce the other day talking to Jonathan Dubey from Israel. And Jonathan is this amazing, intelligent professor in, physics and all this kind of thing. And he'd been working in the field of solar power. And he was saying, in Israel, they have a lot of sun. And they're still it's not very efficient, it's energy density, and it was a really great conversation. I recommend it to people to listen, just to give a sort of reality check to what's possible with solar, because as you say, it's a bit of a niche market for it. If you're camping or you're in a remote location where you're away from the grid, it makes perfect sense. Or maybe if you want to put some on your roof to generate hot water for your house or something like that. But for the most part, as base load power, it's not helpful. And so, which kind of brings me to this issue of, because you'd mentioned various taxes and whatnot. So we have these carbon taxes, we have these regulations that stymies some companies and promotes other companies. And I'm wondering for your company, what's the impact of these various carbon taxes and regulations?
Well, it's absolutely huge, Tammy. It's like just to heat our shop with natural gas, and we work year round, so we require to keep the shop warm so our technicians can keep the equipment in good repair. And the power bill, well, we have welders and we got to keep the lights on. And then the other part is gasoline and diesel fuel to run the equipment and the trucks to go to location. And that's money that's gone forever. We don't get it back. It's like, I know that, when you listen to our prime minister on TV, well, you'll get your carbon tax refund. Well, it's not the case with companies, right? That's just individuals and lower income people at that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying they shouldn't get a rebate, but you can't. I've never been able to understand any like the same goes for GST. And I know it's a little more complex than carbon tax, but we take the money from you and then we give you some of it back, and then everyone's happy. Well, I don't. I guess I'm just not educated enough to understand that. It just doesn't make any sense to me, though. I think if you leave the money in the hands of the people that earn it, I think you'll be a lot farther ahead. Without the carbon tax, we could afford to pay our guys more. We could keep our equipment in, even more updated. We could invest in newer technologies and everything else too. But instead, it's going out the door to the government, and you can enlighten me on what they do with that money
Well,
because I sure don't.
they redistribute it to a lot of those projects that you were describing earlier. So there's, for example, today the government announced 20 billion for rental housing. That so they take the money from the carbon tax and then invest it into projects like that, or whatever the government feels like the money ought to be spent on. So, and they're taking it from your business, making sure that your business can't invest it the way you want to, and instead the government invests it the way they want to. So,
Well, yeah, it's hard to feel like you're in control of your destiny when you're watching these things happen in real time in front of you.
yeah,
And they say, and hey, we absolutely need affordable housing in this country, and it's a crisis. It's getting worse. I see young people that probably don't have a hope of ever owning their own home. And based and like saying we're kind of off the energy topic, but it's pertinent as well. Like you say, it's all part and parcel. If people can make a good living in whatever industry, the energy industry included, they can afford to have their own home eventually and raise their families and be able to put their children through school and university and everything else like a lot of us have been able to do.
yeah. For sure. And well, it's compounding, right? So if if there's all these different taxes going through the economy, and it starts with the carbon dioxide tax, the carbon dioxide emissions tax, and then there's the clean fuel standard tax, and then there's various other taxes on taxes. Like it's rather absurd that the GST gets charged on top of whatever other taxes they've put on things, and then that has a compounding ripple effect through the entire economy. So then it makes everything more expensive. So if you're trying to build a house, well, now you have all of those different taxes, that have, for your fuel and whatnot, and your electricity, because the carbon taxes are on the electricity generation as well. So it makes everything more expensive, and it bothers me when the federal government pretends that it doesn't have an effect, and when it clearly does.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like when they brought the heads of the three major grocery store chains in Canada to the Ottawa last, like 2 weeks ago now, maybe. And I was kind of kept up to date on some of that, and basically they were told like, well, you have to solve this high food price problem, and it's like, and a guy like me on the street can see, why the costs are high. Heat in the grocery stores, power in the grocery stores, shipping the food with fossil fuels to the stores. And then they're going, we don't know why the price is so high. It must be your fault, grocery store chain A, B, or C.
Yeah.
And so they do these things, and to deflect the blame from themselves, who created the problem in the first place. And then so and the problem is the people going to the grocery stores go to, a bag that used to hold was full and hold $30 worth of groceries is now $60 worth of groceries.
Yeah.
And it makes like, and for someone that says they want to help the middle class and the average Canadian, well, that is doing the exact opposite. And the other thing too, I don't know this research to be 100% true, but I kind of looked into it a little bit, and they saying though the grocery stores are making record profits, and absolutely they're doing okay as well. They should. They're looking after their shareholders and their employees and everything else. They need to be making money, but their margins, from what I read, are only 3.6%.
Yeah.
So they make their money on volume, right? Which is fair enough. So if you ask them to drop it down to make like 1.5% or 2% margin, well, how long does that fly for before they start making more changes in the grocery stores, less employees, and and having to cut corners other places? Like, I it just doesn't make any sense to me, I guess, to see
Right.
the.
And the other issue is that a lot of, and I'm sorry that we're sort of digressing, but it's related. But the other issue is that who owns the grocery chains? In fact, it's a lot of pension funds. So is when they're saying that they don't want these shareholders to make as much money, what they're really saying then is they don't want these institutional investors and the pension funds to have a decent rate of return for their investors. So that will have a bad effect on, the public that has their pensions invested in some of these companies.
That's a great point, Tammy. I never even considered that, and that's 100% true, like you say. People in my age group were getting, not hope, I like to keep going for a long time yet, but retirement is a factor, and investments should play a large part in that. And basically, when you see a government that's intent on breaking capitalism in this country, and I
Yeah.
think they've done a yeoman's job of that already. And continuing when they're blaming companies for making a profit, and 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 mad at them, like I said earlier, because, well, you're making too much money and you're charging too much, but it's based on the costs are going up because of you know you know things they've instituted, carbon
Yeah.
tax and taxes on taxes, and yet you think with all this extra tax money that we're giving to the federal government every year through personal and corporate tax and everything else, and you think that we would be running at a surplus in the budget every year.
Well, they have too many other things to spend it on, unfortunately. So I'm wondering,
Yeah.
you mentioned ESG. And are are you concerned at all about some of these new ESG rules that the federal government wants to institute across Canada?
Well, absolutely. I think this gets again into cutting into people's profits. Like, say, the environment is very important, and nobody in the energy industry wants a bad environment. And I think, and you look back in history to what the oil has evolved from the 1800s to even when I started in the 1980s, and up till now, there's been vast changes. Things are cleaner. We're running the clean burning diesel engines, and they burn way less fuel than they used to. And we've had to do this, and we're happy to comply with all these things. Like, oil spills are nearly non-existent now. Everyone has excellent company spill policies, and that's so the environment, I think, is well on its way looking after itself in the long run, as long as companies are you know are encouraged to do better at that. And the social aspect of it, and I understand a lot of it, and I'm not going to make too much commentary, but with the difficulty finding manpower, we have two people of First Nations working for us in leadership roles in our company alone, and I know many others. And every company has visible minorities as well. And it's not that you know we we don't go looking specifically for these people. They come in the door, and if they can do the job, we'll hire them. And so, but being mandated to have a certain amount of people of minorities not in your company is, I don't think it flies anymore. I think we need people. We don't need a certain specific type of person.
Right. So it shouldn't matter what a person's ethnic origins are, as long as they can do the work, it shouldn't matter.
Exactly. And we've done that. We've hired all kinds of people of visible minorities. We've had female roughnecks working for us over the years here and there too. If they
Yeah.
can do the job, they're welcome to come in and do it. We're happy to have them. And some of them have turned out great and then moved on to other careers. And if one walks in the door tomorrow and we have a position, we'll hire them. If they're willing to go there. And they say it's not the most fun industry to be in. It's a lot of hard labor, cold in the winter, hot in the summer, but it pays well. It's rewarding, and you can learn a lot. I've had guys start working on a rig for me, and then gone on to go to university and become engineers and things like that too. It's a good starting point for a lot of people, and I think I think that it's a good opportunity for people from all over the world to come to Canada and seek employment here. I promise you, they'll get treated better working in Western Canada than they will in other parts of the world, based
Yeah.
on my own personal experience and friends of mine that do work overseas currently.
Yeah, for sure. And that's such a good thing to hear about Saskatchewan and Canada in general. So you mentioned that mm, things have changed somewhat, improved with respect to the environment and your operations. And I'm wondering how your use of water has changed over time. Do you use less water in your operations than maybe you used to?
Well, definitely a lot less fresh water. Like we've typically, when we clean out wells and circulate, we use water that's existing in the formations already, like produced water, like salt. Use typically salt water, not. So yeah, and still, if you're making cement, things like if you're cementing, you got to have some fresh water, but definitely not to the extent it used to be.
Right.
And and everything's reclaimed a lot better. Like the oil companies are better at, like, a lot of water flooding goes on, so a lot of that water is always disposed of, but now they're using it to enhance recovery techniques. Crescent Point Energy is a good example of that, and others. And carbon cap, Whitecap Resources in the Weyburn unit, they're using CO2 to
Yeah.
enhance recovery. So things like that. And so I think water usage is definitely, and fractures have gotten more efficient with their water when they're out there doing fracks. Fracks aren't as prevalent as they were a decade ago. They're still happening, but not to the extent. A lot of companies are doing multi-leg horizontals now, and they're having really good success with that, and using less water, less frac sand, everything else too. And the payout time is a lot quicker when you don't have to spend millions of dollars on a big frac.
Yeah, for sure. And especially if do you recycle? Is it there's more recycling of the water going on than before, right?
I believe so. Like, that's a little out of the wheelhouse on the well servicing, because the water comes and then it gets trucked away by the oil companies to be disposed of.
Right.
But
Okay.
I think a lot of it they're just not using as much fresh water. I know there's some potash solution mining where they're using brackish water out of different formations and not fresh water out of potable water out of aquifers. They're
Yeah.
going a little bit deeper and getting some of the brackish water from the Manville zone and things like that, where they're having basically it's water that needs a whole bunch of cleanup, but they can use it just fine for doing solution mining for potash. So it works out really well.
Yeah. Have you seen an uptick in potash development in Saskatchewan
Yeah,
recently?
there sure is. Yeah, like I said, I know there's still some traditional mines. They just built a new traditional mine a couple of years ago, shaft mine with the underground equipment at Rocanville, and they're currently working on that one at Jansen Lake.
Yeah.
But the solution mine just in the process of being put together at my milestone with Western Potash.
Yeah.
The Buffalo Potash, they've got some land and they're developing their strategies currently right now. They got some exciting new techniques that on coming down the line to basically, like you alluded to earlier, use a lot less water and uh, and not to have the big piles of salt on the surface anymore. And I think that's one of the biggest attractions of the solution mine is you don't have if you've ever driven by a potash mine by Saskatoon or Rocanville, traditional potash mines, there's huge piles of salt on surface. And these
Yeah.
new solution mines, so the solution mines, they don't have that. The salt all goes back down underground in a brine water solution.
Mhm.
So things like that definitely nice for landscaping. You don't have to worry about you know a whole bunch of acres of land being contaminated with salt either.
Yeah. That's good to know too. So what's your view of Canada's net zero commitments? Do you think they're feasible and, you know,
Well, I, I guess it's just opinion time again. I think net zero is a bit of a farce, in my opinion. And I say you want to do the best you can, obviously. The best use of our resources is always the primary goal. But when you when you say, well, we'll buy a bunch of carbon credits through this company that has trees, and so we can burn a bunch more fuel. The fuel's going to get burnt anyway, whether you buy the credits or not, right? So, and I know the money would be, like you said earlier, would be used to fund other, green in quotation marks projects, right? But I think rewarding somebody like that, a business like that, doesn't make any sense to me. I think we need to focus on better use of the resources we have and focus on funding the future with the current resources to make advancements in to pick a Star Trek term, the dilithium crystal, come up with something like that, something where we have unlimited power on tap all the time, and it may exist, it may not, and that's for the future to decide, I guess.
Yeah.
But currently, I think we need to make the best use of the current resources we have, and and it's so simple because right now we're in, the energy industry and everything across the board. This is how people go to work and make their livings, so they can raise families and educate them and move forward. And if we get rid of these jobs and with these green jobs, which I guess we'll hire people to tear down the windmills in 20 years and put up new ones. I guess there's a make work project and same for solar panels. But but like you say, and it goes back to energy density and storage. We nothing has the density or the storage capabilities of fossil fuels right now. And
Yeah.
Mr. Stephen Gabalt and Mr. Trudeau need to understand that a little in more detail. I'm not sure why they don't, but that's a good question for them, I guess. So.
Yeah. So how would you propose that to recruit more people? Because you say that it's difficult to find enough people to work on the rigs and to do the well servicing and whatnot. So what do you think can be done in order to recruit more people?
Well, I guess first off, the media can stop demonizing us at any time, and same with our current federal government. They need to say there are great careers out here. We need to do a better job as an industry. And I've had conversations with the president of our association, Mark Schultz, the COEC in Calgary, and some of my customers as well, like guys that work in Calgary for oil companies, saying, how do we get people in the industry? And this is something we've talked about at length and over coffee and lunch and just on the phone. And we need to, like say, don't quit demonizing your industry. And B, we need to maybe advertise a little bit better in Eastern Canada, maybe in Toronto, where the cost of living is ridiculous, and you come out to Saskatchewan, and you can buy a pretty decent home for under $400,000, and
Yeah.
that's barely a down payment in Toronto, from what I've been hearing. I'm exaggerating, but it's true, and so I think there's a lot of opportunity out here for the future. Saskatchewan is nowhere near out of oil yet, and Alberta sure as heck isn't either. And or British Columbia and Manitoba, like Tundra Oil and Gas, have great success in Manitoba and now Saskatchewan as well. There's a lot of opportunity here, drilling new wells and operating the current wells and abandoning these wells in the future, and there's decade this work's going to be going on long after I'm gone. And the other thing that people keep forgetting, to build electric cars and build solar panel and windmills, we need oil and oil byproducts, like the plastics and everything else. And this gets into the whole other thing about getting kind of going around in a bit of a circle here. But the mining that takes place to get all these rare earth minerals and things like that we need to make the electric cars and the batteries, the cobalt and that. And I don't know if there's enough material in the world, and maybe there is, to create all this. But right now, crude oil is doing a better job of doing, making us a mobile, well-fed society, as opposed to something we haven't really done all the research on yet.
Yes, you're right. I mean, that's one of the fundamental contradictions of the energy transition is that it's there. The argument is that we need to reduce our footprint and impact on Earth, but in so doing, by pushing the transition to renewable or so-called renewable energy, requires a huge land footprint and environmental impact, as you say, with the mining of the cobalt, with the lithium. I mean, it's great in Saskatchewan that they're developing a technique where you won't have to do the whole um, pumping out the lithium brine and letting it evaporate out to in the air, but a different way of extracting it from a solution. um, but you still need all of these other minerals and metals and whatnot that require not just the mining but a lot of processing. And so as I've made the case in other places, this, if it's about not just being environmentally friendly or whatever, and Canada has an outstanding record on ensuring that our that we minimize whatever impact we have on the environment when we do development. The other issue is energy security. So we'd be basically offshoring our security to other entities, or in particular China, because China controls a significant amount of the mining and the processing of all these materials, not to mention also the building of, say, the solar panels. So they manufacture the solar panels, they manufacture the wind turbines, and then ship them over to us. And so, we have all of these amazing resources that are high energy density, various hydrocarbons, whether it's oil, natural gas, or coal. And in the case of Saskatchewan, the best uranium in the world. And rather than using our own resources, which allows us to be energy independent and have energy security, we will be giving that up for a potentially to be reliant on a potentially hostile entity like China. It defies belief in many ways.
Well, and you're exactly spot on, especially when you mention energy security. And like you say, by shutting down, say tomorrow, Stephen Gabalt could snap his fingers and shut down the Canadian oil patch. Well, guess what? We still need oil. So where are we getting it from? We're getting it from Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and other countries like that maybe aren't quite as concerned about ESG, and they're not quite as concerned about the environment as we are here in Canada. And you see these things, and now you know, we're at their whim. And basically, the crude oil price is going to be $150 a barrel West Texas now. So, and what are we going to do about it? Absolutely nothing, because we don't have any oil wells anymore. And I'm being facetious when I talk like that, because I know we're not going to be abandoning every well overnight. But that's the risk we put ourselves in, the position we put ourselves in as a country, by letting other countries dictate how we operate. And Saudi Arabian oil still flows into the St. Lawrence River every day on tanker ships,
Yeah. Yeah.
and for no good reason. And I understand there's probably trade implications that are above my pay grade and everything else that we make deals with other countries, and I understand that, and that's important too. But we we have the opportunity to supply our own crude oil and gas and sell it and fund our future with you know exciting projects that can possibly down the road can make for a greener future than we currently have.
Right. And the problem with Ottawa and the different policy initiatives that they're putting forward and all these 2030 plans and 2050 plans and so on is that it sends out market signals. And so you won't get the same level of investment in order to increase production to put that oil on the market that could reduce the prices. Instead, the market sees or hears what Ottawa's doing and they're like, okay, well, we can count that Canadian oil off the market. So, then they price or the market responds to the different reductions in production from OPEC or OPEC plus, um, calculating that, well, Canada won't be contributing anything. It's the same thing with like the LNG prices in Europe and globally, because Canada can't actually put our LNG on the market yet because Coastal GasLink isn't finished, and that's the only one that's operate even close to being operational. That means that those prices can't be reduced because we can't get our LNG on the market. So it's interesting that our government is making these decisions, which then affect the larger global pricing of these different commodities that we could be helping bringing the price down. But that's not how Ottawa sees it, I guess. There's no business case, apparently.
Yeah, like I guess not, like you say, and we and like I say, we like I mentioned earlier, we do a way better job in Canada producing the fossil fuels, and like countries like Japan would love nothing better to buy Canadian natural gas and
Yeah, they're
LNG.
desperate for it, for sure.
They,
Yeah.
and we have the opportunity there, but it's just like, well, no, it's a dirty fuel. Well, no, it's not. It's very clean. We have it. We have an abundance of it for centuries in this country. Like this is some, LNG will be something that our grandchildren, great grandchildren will be watching flow out. Hopefully, at Kitimat and other places in Canada too, other parts of the world where they can use it to make electricity and stay warm and have decent lives as well. And so yeah, it's sad that it's all based on our current government and their short-sightedness. And I think this goes into one of the problems we have with situations like this is a 4-year election cycle. Governments will say, and of any stripe, they base everything they do on getting elected again within the next 4 years, the day after they're elected. And I think this is the wagon they've hitched their horses to, and they want to continue down this path, thinking that will get them reelected again, and making promises for 2035 and 2050. I don't think they can promise all kinds of wonderful things as long as they know they'll get elected in the next general election, which we sure hope they don't. So.
For sure, because I mean, it sends such the wrong signals. And if I could just mention back on LNG, the EU was talking about how they want to do this transition and they're going to be all electric by 2050 and so on. And Trudeau said, well, there's no business case for LNG and so on. But the EU has signed numerous long-term contracts, 15 to 20 years for LNG, whether it's from Israel or Egypt or Qatar or the United States. They're buying it wherever they can get it. And they're not just saying, well, just supply us this year, but they're signing these long-term contracts. So it it just bothers me when I revisit, Trudeau's whole there's no business case for LNG. It's like, oh my gosh, come on. That's so not true.
Well, absolutely not. They say it's LNG and oil and gas and crude oil as well. There's a business model for it. Like you say, companies in Canada, despite the hurdles put in front of them by the federal government, they're still making money to the point where they may have more trouble getting money from banks and lending institutions. So a lot of these companies have done share buybacks, and they're drilling on cash flow. And
Yeah.
then in order to have a good return for the shareholders, and like you said earlier, then it goes into retirement funding and that too for people. People have their money invested in these things, and so this will they see this, and they're not stupid. They're smart, and they know how to. Well, we're still going to make a profit. It won't be the profit we should be making, but we're going to be viable, because you can't just up and quit running your oil company and find something else to do. You're heavily invested, in mineral rights, surface land, and equipment and people.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I really appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your workday to have this conversation, and I'm grateful for your insights, and I really hope that you're able to find more employees.
Oh yeah, I think it's a challenge, but I think people are, there's always good people looking for good high paying jobs. And I think that's the future there. I'd like to thank you again, Tammy, for all the work you do with your podcast and everything for our industry. We sure appreciate it. And shout out to all the guys in my industry, my business partners, Tim and Jerry and everybody, and Paul. And I'm blessed to be able to work in this industry. It's been a great career for me. I love it. I've made great friends over the years, and that's as important as anything else. Is how, we got great guys working for us, and they do. They're not workers. They're family. And
Yeah.
that's one of the key things about, I think, any business, but the energy industry seems to lend itself well to this. Is your staff become your family, and we like to treat them as such. They're a great bunch of guys. So shout out to all of them too for doing a great job.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to everyone. Thank you so much.